Good evening, everyone. How are we doing?
What's going on?
What's up?
Good.
Good. Right.
How you guys doing?
As everyone can see, I am outnumbered again. America 3-1 to the UK, but I'll fight the corner. So yeah, hello everyone to everyone that's joined us, and those of you watching it back. As you know, we've got the very knowledgeable Chad Clayton with us this afternoon, this evening, this morning, wherever you may be, to talk all things coral nutrition, invert nutrition, clown nutrition, whatever it may be. So yeah, it's great to have you with us, Chad. Thanks for giving up your time. How have you been?
Sure thing. Oh, I appreciate it. Been well. Yeah, we're having a good year, and trade show season has started, and aquaculture is ramping up this time of year typically, and so yeah, all hands on deck, and things are moving nicely. So yeah.
Good to hear. Good to hear. How about yourself, Dom? Have you had a good week?
Oh, very good week. Yeah, excellent. Well, you just mentioned the American and British thing. So you know that the town I live in, the Concord, Massachusetts, is they claim to be the starting point of the Revolutionary War.
Yeah. Right, okay.
Oh yeah, there's a museum here, and then all the high school and primary school students have to learn how the militias are hiding behind a tree and shooting on redcoats.
So you're the troublemakers then, right? And lastly, but by no means least, Terrell, great to have you back again. How you been, my man?
Been good, man. Feeling much better. Finally kicking this sickness that we've had for the last couple of weeks, and then now it's back to the crunch time before Reefapalooza next weekend.
Yeah,
Nice.
Busy time for you guys, right? Busy time.
It's nuts right now, man. But hey, it's worth every bit, and it's feast or famine. I'm gonna take the feast while it's here.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Well, talking of preparing and stuff, I went up to see our missing friend Tom in the week. Up to his place Wednesday night. I was working up that way anyway. He got his pound of flesh out of me, put me to work, algae feeding all of his tanks. And then he goes and drops the bombshell that he's not with us tonight. So I feel completely used and abused this week. But hey ho, we carry on. Before we go on to the main sort of bulk of what we want to talk about, we'll just dive in and say hello to everyone. See who's with us tonight. Of course, the great John Wright is here first, signing the register. Well done, John. Good evening to you, buddy. We've got Tony with us. Hi, Tony. Hope you're doing well. K13 Trav. Good afternoon, ladies. Well, great to have you with us.
Wow.
A few people talking amongst themselves. James, evening, James. Hope you're well. We'll keep going. Rama's in the house. Hi, Tom. How you doing? Hope you enjoyed. I saw you was at the Mansfield meet last week. Finally saw your face on camera. Abs Reef, how you doing? Our week has been not too bad. Techers is in the house again. Good evening, Techers. UKM 120. Hi, Anthony. Great to see you, mate. Prime Corals. Good evening. A few more chatting. Who else? Harry West. Hiya, Harry. And we've got Lee with us. Hiya, Lee. It's a nice surprise. Baby Dave. Hello, Baby Dave. Hope you're good. I've been speaking to Baby Dave because one of our friends is out on a fishing trip at the moment. He's gone over to France, and as some of you may know, I went to France fishing in September for a week and caught the grand total of bugger all. And Sean has been over there, and Sean has basically had 50 pound carp every day just for fun. So yeah, great fun that. Gazza, hello Gaz, how you doing, mate? And Tommy and Sharon. It wouldn't be a Friday night without Tommy and Sharon with us. I think they was put to work at Tom's place over the weekend as well. So we're all chipping in. Lindsay, my favorite female American Lindsay is with us. Critical, hello mate, hello. We have Velcro's Reef. Oh, fellow reef peasants. I can definitely join you with that. Yeah, I'm definitely a reefing peasant. Economical Reefer. Good to see you. Chris is with us. Hi, Chris. Hope you're doing well. Sharon as well. Sharon's on her own this time. Hi, Sharon. And we have the beautiful Elisa. I'm sure Elisa might be seeing you over at RAP, no doubt.
Yep.
No, she's gonna be in Okinawa, I believe.
Oh.
Oh, really? Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia, if you're going to be in Okinawa, tell us more. That sounds amazing. Peter Parry, one of the UK's best coral growers. If you ever see Peter Parry's tank, some of the colours he pulls out of SPS is amazing.
Nice.
Hey, Andrew and Paul are with us. Good to see you.
Oh, Angie, hey.
There we go. I think that's where I first met you, Chad, or the only time I met you was in AAC when you come over. And yeah, rather embarrassingly, I knew your products very well, but I didn't know you. And I was, if I remember rightly, talking to you in front of the NPS tank for a bit, and he was asking about how it was looked after. And I was like, we use all these foods called Reef Nutrition. It's really good. And he was like, oh, I'm very glad to hear that. That's how we met. Mickey Boy Mick, one of the friends of the show. Hi, Mick. Hope you're well. I think that's getting through everyone. Oh, no. Reefy Reese. Good evening, Mr. Rickson. We have Grandad with us. How you doing, Rob? Nice Achilles. This is the man that sold me my Achilles tang that eats all the silicon.
Oh.
So he's quietly laughing in the background by the looks of it. Mo. Hi, Mo. How you doing? Good to see you. Steve and Owen. Wow, there's a lot of people here tonight. I think we're getting towards the end of it. Nice. Mr. Fox himself. Hi, Steve. Hope you're doing well, mate.
What's up,
Preparing
Steve?
to go over to wrap. Ron. Good to see you, Ron. Hope you're doing well. Ron was part of the meet last weekend up in Mansfield. Good turnouts. We've got Grant Godfrey. Hi, Grant. PSCK5KV. Good evening, sup. And I think that brings us up to everyone. So that was a long list. Great to have you all with us. Not forgetting those of you that may watch it back as well, who's not alive. Don't forget to put some questions in the comments as we go through for Chad. But right, we can relax a bit now. I think best place for us to start, Chad. I think everyone knows Reef Nutrition, but probably not the whys, the history, how it came about. So if I could hand over to you for a bit, tell us where it came from. How did it come to be what it is today?
Sure thing. Yeah, let's get into it. It's good to see everybody here. And we are Reef Nutrition is a brand of a company called Reed Mariculture, and we started Reed Mariculture. It's a family-owned company started by the Reed family. Tim Reed is still very much involved in the company. We have shareholders that are family members and friends of his, and we hire some of their family members, and so we are certainly a family business. And Tim got things going back in the mid 90s. He wanted to get into aquaculture and start growing oysters. And found along the way that to grow oysters, you need to feed them phytoplankton, microalgae. And so to be a good oyster, land-based oyster culturing facility, you had to be really good at growing the food for those animals, and that is phytoplankton. And so that's where we got our start, was, in a little trailer growing, little flasks and things of bubbling algae and accumulating different species from all over the world, species that had been proven valuable in bivalve aquaculture and shrimp aquaculture. And so things just started growing from there, and eventually some universities in California and bivalve farmers got wind of this and heard that, Tim was doing this, and kind of, put it in his head. They're like, hey, listen, forget about the oysters. Why don't you grow the phytoplankton? Why don't you become a master at growing this stuff? Find a way to preserve it, concentrate it, and we'll buy it from you, because we hate growing this stuff. It's a pain in the butt. And so, and yes, that is true. And I, anybody that's growing phytoplankton can tell you it is incredibly challenging, and a lot of people typically give up, or they just can't grow the right species or scale up. And so it's what is known as a bottleneck in aquaculture. And so that's really where the company took off. That's where the light bulb went off in his head. And so we started expanding phytoplankton culture here in California. We're doing it in a very unique area in California. We have very mild winters, good smooth seasons, no severe weather and things like that. We have abundant sunshine. And so we can grow our microalgae in greenhouses with natural sunlight. We don't have to spend tons of money on climate control and lighting, because if we did that, we wouldn't exist. This wouldn't be cost be cost prohibitive to do that. And so that's something that we've got going on here that's very unique. And so with all that phytoplankton and us selling it into aquaculture in the United States and globally, we started having a hobbyist reach out to us, and they're like, "Hey, we know you're growing this phytoplankton. We know phytoplankton will be good for our non-photosynthetic corals, our bivalves, filter feeders, sponges, feather duster worms, things like that." And they're like, "Why don't you guys sell it to us? Like find a way to, put it in a bottle or whatever, and and sell it to us." So in 2005, Tim and his brother Randy started Reef Nutrition, and Phyto Feast was our flagship product. We were one of the first companies to sell phytoplankton into the aquarium hobby, and so we were able to put all the species that we grow into this product, and it's very much the same today as it was back then, just because of how consistent we are, and that's where Reef Nutrition really took off. And from there, we just decided to start growing other things with the phytoplankton, like zooplankton, copepods, rotifers, finding other sources of foods. And this was all came to us slowly over time with our customer base reaching out and saying, "Hey, what about you guys offering fish eggs? Or those rotifers you're growing and you're selling into aquaculture, can we feed those to corals?" And so that's kind of how the line blossomed, and our customer base really likes the fact that our stuff is in liquid suspension. It's easy to use. You don't have to reconstitute it. It's the nutrition is in, it's like the whole organism basically is what we like to promote, is that, we're selling whole fish eggs, whole oyster eggs, phytoplankton, and all these other things. We're not just combining them all together into some soup. So we've kept things very separate, so that they could be used by hobbyists and professionals in a very deliberate way. You can feed specific things deliberately to your animals. And then the variety of nutrition comes with all that too, with all the products that we carry. And then we also got into the pelleted world, because pellets are very useful in aquaculture as a weaning diet. And I came to the company because I have all this experience in aquaculture. I've worked for the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Indiana doing lakes and stream surveys. I've worked in a molecular biology laboratory in St. Louis on zebra danios, the little Danio ririo freshwater fish. I worked at ORA for 4 years, where I got a lot of experience with marine ornamentals. I've bred numerous species of clownfish, dottybacks, seahorses, cardinals, and all along the way, I had to grow live feed organisms to support those efforts. And I was out in Hawaii before I came to reed mariculture. I was growing copepods out there, and I moved to California to settle down and finally put an end to my gypsy aquaculture career. Got married, decided I'm done traveling the world and jumping from job to job. I'm done with it. And so the Reeds interviewed me, and they brought me on. They're like, "Look, you have all this live feed experience. We want to start growing copepods. We want to be a source for those animals, because that is also another bottleneck in aquaculture, is copepod culture, and having a source for those animals for people to buy and start culturing them themselves and learning from people that culture them." And so that's kind of where I got going in the company. And then I just kind of meandered into Reef Nutrition and just took the mic and became the front man, and the rest is history. And here I am. So
superb. That was a very good introduction. So we know you that as mainly as coral feed sort of suppliers. But what I found really interesting is that the mariculture of fish was a massive part of the business in terms of pellet development, and that's sort of focused on larval stages and stuff. It wasn't all about the corals, right? It was a mix of both.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, we have a number of fish hatcheries all over the world that buy our algae to feed to their live feed organisms. So let's say you're hatching Artemia, your brine shrimp, and you want to grow the brine shrimp out. You would feed it phytoplankton. That's just a great source of nutrition for those animals, and you can give them a great nutritional profile by feeding them multiple species of phytoplankton. And the reason why phytoplankton is so useful is because they're primary producers. There are tens of thousands of species. We work with a teeny tiny little handful of the ones that are found globally. And what's cool about phytoplankton is they synthesize, they produce fatty acids, of carotenoids, vitamins, proteins, things that animals cannot synthesize. And so the phytoplankton needs to be, in the diet of the organism that's eating the phytoplankton. So there's copepods in the ocean eating phytoplankton, and then something eats the copepod, and then, and that's a fish, and then the fish grows, and then something eats the fish, and so on. Then you get dolphins and sharks, and everything's eating everything, and it all starts with the phytoplankton. And so we sell phytoplankton to fish hatcheries that are feeding to rotifers, copepods, brine shrimp, and they also, one of the biggest goals in finfish aquaculture is to get your animals off of live feeds, because live feeds is a very demanding aspect of aquaculture. You have to have dedicated staff to grow these organisms. You have to be consistent. They have to be available when your fish hatch and they're ready to eat. You have to be able to supply your larval fish and your post-metamorphic fish with these live feed organisms throughout that process, or they're just going to die, and all that money and all that time and effort you put into that is going to be wasted. And so what a lot of these fish hatcheries desperately want to do is wean their fish off of live feed organisms, and that's where these pelleted foods come into play. And pelleted foods have come a long way. I remember feeding flake foods to my fish back in the 80s, and there was nothing like it is now. And so we found this pelleted food, decided to start offering it to our finfish aquaculture customers, and the clownfish people really took to it quickly. And so and then we just decided, hey, let's make this pelleted food available to hobbyists, because it comes in a variety of sizes. It's got good nutritional qualities. It's got carotenoids that act as an antioxidant and pigmentation enrichment. And so let's, make it available. And then people started feeding it to their fish, to their corals. I know people that feed it to frog, tadpoles, freshwater fish, saltwater fish, you name it. So that's really where we got into the pellet food game, and that's why all that started.
So do you guys make a TDO? Is that from you guys?
So the TDO is us, and that's us taking a pelleted weaning diet that comes in a variety of sizes and doing something called top dressing. So we coat the pellet with a species of algae. It's a freshwater algae called Haematococcus pluvialis. Haematococcus pluvialis, when it's grown under sunlight, the UV stress results in that cell, because normally the cell is green, it results in that cell producing a red carotenoid called astaxanthin. And that astaxanthin helps that cell protect itself from UV stress. And so that astaxanthin is really good as an antioxidant and a pigmentation enhancer. And it really translates to wild type coloration in Ocellaris and Percula clownfish specifically. But it also just creates a more healthy, robust animal that's stress more strong against stress, things like that, stress resistant, and so that food and what we did to it, taking it to that next level, was just huge for breeders, and hobbyists love those attributes as well.
Since you mentioned,
I never would have believed.
Sorry.
So I never would have believed that captive bred things like mandarins would eat pellet food, and the captive bred mandarins we've been importing in the UK have been taking TDO. I think Reese in the chat has got a couple of captive bred mandarins that he's reared on TDO, and it's like the fish you never thought would take a pellet and now being captive bred on this stuff, and it's just making that so much, like mandarins now probably more accessible to 50% more reefers than they were previously because of that pelleted foods available. Right. So I think it's so much more convenient, really so much more convenient than rearing all your own. I totally get it. Sorry, Dong, I interrupted you.
Oh, no. Sorry about that. Since Chad, you mentioned that the UV resistant and sunlight. So I want to ask you one question. The phytoplankton grow under natural sunlight. Do they have different nutritional profile than the phytoplankton, actually aquaculture that grow indoor by artificial light? Do they have a different?
They not necessarily. No, they would continue to synthesize the same fatty acids and things like that under artificial light. Yeah, it would be very similar nutritional profile.
Okay.
Yeah. The phyto piece is an interesting one, because if I'm correct, you supply two types. You supply a live and a suspension form.
Yeah.
So obviously we we can't, probably for legal importation reasons, can't get the live stuff over here. But is there much difference nutritionally between the what would you call it, homeostatic stuff or whatever? I don't know what the term is, but the non-live stuff.
Right. So yeah, I don't like to use the word dead, because dead implies that it's decaying. And so we say non-viable, but it is dead. It's not alive. It cannot replicate itself. You wouldn't be able to culture it. And this is kind of the bread and butter of what we sell. We sell frozen algae and refrigerated algae to people that are feeding it to very sensitive organisms like oyster larvae and shrimp larvae. And so there's this misconception that live algae is better than dead algae. And that is absolutely not the case, because what we do is very special. Nobody else that's selling phytoplankton into any industry in any nation is doing what we're doing, except there's maybe two or three others that are doing it with freshwater algae in Asia, and I think there's one in Europe. But so what we do is we grow this algae like anybody else would, and then when we go to harvest it, we separate the cells from the growing media. That way, what we can do is we can concentrate the algae, and it gets so concentrated that it looks like clay. We have 5-gallon buckets. We're harvesting it, putting it in these buckets, and it literally is so concentrated it looks like clay. It would blow your mind how much algae we're harvesting on a daily basis. And so what we do from there is we take the algae, we combine it with other species if we're making a blended product, or we have single species products, and then we put it in our liquid suspension mixture, and it varies depending on the species and the product. And so what it is the cells are fully intact. Everything that was in that cell, the fatty acids, the vitamins, the organelles, all these, the chloroplast, all that stuff is fully intact. It's just frozen in time, basically. And so when an organism eats that algae, it's going to get the same exact nutrition as it would from a live cell. And in fact, the fact that it isn't alive anymore means that those things are not in flux inside the cell. They are frozen in time. And so when we harvest the algae, we harvest it when it's in its best growth phase, when it has its best nutritional value, when it's not stressed out. And that's quite the challenge to what we do. And it's why a lot of people don't want to touch this stuff. And so what we can do with that algae is people can buy it highly concentrated. They can store it long term. They can buy a lot of it all at once and put it in a chest freezer or in a refrigerator and then feed it out as they need it. Because some of our products are good for up to 3 years kept frozen. And so day one to, towards the end of that 3 years, that algal cell is fully intact. And as soon as you thaw it out and feed it to your target organism, they're going to get the same exact nutrition as day one.
Wow.
And it's something that's quite remarkable, really hard for people to wrap their heads around. And so I'm glad that, people are here to hear this, because we do have a lot of people saying live is better. And it's just not the case. I mean, if live was better and ours didn't work, we wouldn't exist. And we certainly wouldn't be selling it to people who are growing larval organisms, because you want to talk about delicate animals that have very specific needs. It doesn't get any more difficult than that. So,
yeah,
So,
I
is it
totally get that.
Is it possible to sell them as dry form?
sure,
Because
yeah,
they save a lot of shipping.
yeah, you could freeze dry it, things like that. But what we don't want is we don't want the cell to be damaged.
Okay.
And then when you reconstitute it, potentially it's cracked and those things leak out. And then when the animal eats it, they're not getting what was in the cell. There's just a little bit of a fear of that. We like to have everything remain almost as close as it is when it's in its aquatic environment. And that's why, it's in a liquid suspension.
If I could bring in,
sorry.
oh, sorry, Terrell.
I was going to say, I've heard the fallacy plenty of times that, feeding unviable, phyto is going to result in spiking your nutrients and only driving that up. But yeah, that's not true, because like you said, the organisms are still going to eat it. They're still going to, it's still there. It's not like it just disappears and just breaks down out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah. The algal cells aren't that delicate. When you put them in a reef tank, they're not going to immediately explode and just start polluting your tank. It just doesn't work like that. There's a whole industry of people feeding dry foods to their corals. Of course, corals are going to eat something that isn't alive, and doesn't even resemble anything that they would have normally eaten in nature. And so it's just, I'm constantly combating that, and I'm glad that you guys, people like you, are giving me an opportunity to explain these things, because what we do is very different than everyone else.
Yeah, that's a nice point for me to bring in a question from the audience, because then Dave's raised the question here, and where you just explained it, how your products are super concentrated, kind of explains it. But says, what kind of effect are we talking about regarding phosphate and nitrates coming out of these liquid feeds? Because hands up, I've got first-hand experience of. So when I do a medication on a tank, I am working out the parts per million to the T to get my dose rate right. With the foods, I'm like, just pour it in, and then I noticed a phosphate spike, a nitrate spike on literally going through a bottle of phyto in the space of 7 days. But that was on me because I needed probably half a cap of it, and I was putting in half a bottle of it, if that makes sense. So can you maybe, you've explained quite a bit there, but is there a danger of high phosphate and nitrate leaching from overfeeding this stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, that goes with anything you feed to your tank. I've heard people tell me they feed their tank 6 or 7 times a day, and I'm just like horrified by that. I mean, unless you've got good waste export and you are on top of husbandry techniques and you do not get lazy, you can do that. And there's dosing systems out there for that kind of thing. But with our products, they are so concentrated. Our phytoplankton, our phytofeast, is 20 to 40 times as concentrated as anybody else that's selling phyto into the industry, because they're just pulling the phytoplankton out of their cultures. And so you can only get so dense in a live culture, upwards of 100 million cells per milliliter. Our products are upwards of 50 to 60 billion cells per milliliter. Mm-hmm. And so you have to start off very conservatively. And we do have recommendations, 5 milliliters roughly per 100 gallons is a good start. And of course, you can get phosphates and nitrates from phytoplankton, because that's what we feed to them. That's what they require to grow. I mean, that's what life has in it anyway. Yeah. And so, when it comes to feeding corals, it's tricky, filter feeders, because you don't actually see them consuming it. Like a fish eats a pellet. You see the pellet go into the mouth and they consume it and it's gone. It disappears. It got eaten. But with corals and filter feeders, that is a lot trickier. And so we always recommend people just start off very conservatively and increase the dose over time, and just do a feeding, wait a day, 6 hours, and test your water quality. Confirm that you either overfed or you're right where you need to be. And so, we get that question all the time. And that's about as good of an answer as I can give, is just pump the brakes, be conservative, measure the dose if you need to. Don't just pop the cap and squeeze the bottle and then walk away, because every tank is different biologically. Every tank processes nutrient differently. We all have a different number of mouths to feed in our aquariums. And so this isn't a one size fits all. Just take it slow and measure the food, just like you would with pellets and flakes. You're not going to feed a ton of pellets to your tank suddenly, and your fish eat up half of it and the rest of it goes to waste. And you got to be very careful with pellets too, because they are very nutrient dense. I only feed pellets to my fish once a day, maybe every other day, just because of how dense they are nutritionally. And I always tell people, I'm like, fish are always hungry. They're always going to be swimming right up to where you're at. They're always looking hungry, but slow it down, take it easy.
So I got a question for you.
I did some
sorry.
Sorry. We're going to do this all night because we're all busting with questions here.
I was going to say, like, feeding practice, for instance. So let's say, for people that want to look, I guess the question is, feeding all at once, does it stay suspended in the system? Does it kind of fall out? Or, would you suggest slowly dissipating it over the period of a day?
Yeah, so in aquaculture, that's like one of the biggest things that we do is we feed small amounts multiple times a day to our target organisms, because one giant pulse feeding, you're inevitably going to get waste. The animals can only consume so much in a certain time period, and then you've got your filters that are working against you as well. So What's interesting about phytoplankton, the species that we work with, is that nothing is larger than 15 micron. Typically, most of the phytoplankton species are 5 micron or lower. So even if you have, filters and things like that, that stuff's going to go through the filter and recirculate through your system. Phytoplankton can handle the shear forces of pumps, recirculating pumps. It doesn't destroy them, as they go through. And so, yeah, I always tell people, if you're going to feed our products to your corals, to your tank, maybe take the dose that you would do once a day and chop it into 2. Do it in the morning, do it in the afternoon. And of course, best case scenario would be to set up an auto dosing system of some sort. And there's some amazing technology out there for auto dosing. I use GHL auto dosers to feed phytoplankton to my copepod cultures. My dosers are so perfectly dialed in. They feed the perfect amount of algae every 9 minutes to my copepods, and it has changed everything for me. And the rotifers are the same way.
Are you still keeping them refrigerated, or are you just kind of letting them room temperature? Okay.
So the phytoplankton I keep in a refrigerator in a food reservoir, a stainless steel reservoir with a submersible pump in there to keep because I dilute it a little bit with salt water. So to keep it all suspended and homogenized while the dosers extract the food out and drip it into the tanks. And that's what a lot of our customers will do. They'll set up these refrigerator systems next to their live feed organism or their aquarium. I know people have done this with their aquarium. And dose feed throughout the day, and people love our foods for that because we put food grade sodium alginate in our Reef Nutrition products to keep everything suspended, to keep things from settling. And this is food grade, so it's not gonna poison your tank. It's not gonna pollute it. And there's people with like Anthias and bivalves. And people that are growing corals to sell them, they want to, get quick growth out of their corals. They'll set up these dosing systems. And so that's the best way to do it. But if you have to do it manually, you want to chop those feedings up into little bits throughout the day.
So, Chad, what is the major species of phytoplankton in the phytofeast?
So the most dominant species in that product is Nanochloropsis. That's the genus. I forget the species, but Nanochloropsis, and that's the one you typically find people growing. It's very green. It's tiny. It's 1 to 2 micron. So 50 micron is barely visible to the naked eye. So you can imagine it's smaller than a blood cell kind of thing. So very tiny particle size.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because that when you look online, the social media, people keep emphasizing that other species of phyto, how good it is against nano. But then when I do the literature search, I found out that nano is pretty super by itself. So that there's no, So that there's always that we have people growing phyto at home, always saying that, this is much better than nano. I said, well, the literature doesn't say so. It's just the advertisement says so.
I mean, when we're talking about phytoplankton and aquaculture, some species are better than others for your target organism. So like when you're growing Penaeid shrimp, food shrimp that we get on our plate from aquaculture, they feed their shrimp very specific species because of the nutritional profile. So Tetraselmis is another phytoplankton. That's a very large one, and it's got flagella. That's the one that swims really fast through the water column, kind of corkscrewing. That one has sterols in it and taurine, and these are things that have helped shrimp farmers with their larvae. As their larvae are growing, there's this disease, or there's this thing that happens with shrimp larvae where they don't make it far. They just die. And it's some kind of weird syndrome thing. And it's all diet related. And Tetraselmis has helped to alleviate that. And so, that species is important. T. isochrysis is another one that is very rich in the fatty acid DHA. And that one is very important to marine finfish aquaculture. DHA has to be in the diet. It has to be in there for that developing larval fish, so that you prevent skeletal deformities, pigment deformities, and mortalities. If that fatty acid isn't in the diet, you're not going anywhere. So there are certain importances, but nano is loaded full of arachidonic acid, ARA, and that's also a vital fatty acid especially in freshwater systems, mussels and things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't slight any of them. You know, they all have positive attributes. They're all equally as important.
Okay. On the theme of phyto then, Chad, we spoke a bit about in the green room before we came on. Those amateur aquarists among us that have all tried to culture phyto, myself included, you might end up with a bubbling green bottle of water. But I know from my experience that isn't necessarily phyto, and it's very easy to contaminate, and it ends up turning into a stinky goop, and it just all goes wrong. So what do you do on such a large scale to keep that like species specific culture and stop contamination? I can't give you secrets away, I get that,
Yeah.
but is there any sort of tips or?
Yeah, I mean, we employ biosecurity techniques and techniques for sterilization, and also microscopic evaluation, and so because this is what our customers rely on. You know, when we sell a product that we say these are the species in there, we have to be true to that, or they're not going to be able to do anything with it. You know, if they don't have the right species in that product, they're not going to be able to grow their animal, and so. What we do is we just employ these very strict biosecurity protocols, sterilization, and every day quality control is we're taking samples from all of our cultures, and we're talking, you know, we're working with millions of liters of phytoplankton. It's just amazing. Like when I came to work here, I had seen a lot of algae being grown in facilities, and I was blown away. And so it's basically comes down to a lot of microscopic evaluation, you know, putting the sample under the slide, you know, using the right magnification and identifying that, yep, that's what's in the culture. That's what we're used to seeing. And that's what's going to go into the product. And also when we do those observations, we can detect contaminants. So if there's a nematode or something that got into our culture, or protozoans, you know, protozoans are a common contaminant, these little ciliates, and they are in your reef tank. They are ubiquitous. Same with worms. They're in there. If you look through your substrate under a microscope, they would be in there moving around, and you would be like, wow. And so we are also looking for those little things. And while sometimes we can tolerate those things, they don't negatively affect the culture. They would not make it through the process of us freezing and refrigerating and processing our phytoplankton. We still don't want them to be in there. And so we do our best to filter them out. And if we see a culture that's starting to you know, lose the battle, we'll just break that culture down and start a new one. And these are things that, like I said, our customers rely on this. They put their trust in us. And so that's something you know, hobbyists have to be careful with, is that when you're buying phytoplankton from somebody, you're not going to know what you're looking at. You're not going to know what's in the bottle. If you don't have a microscope, you just have to trust that that's what they're telling you is in there. And you know, you got to be careful. We don't grow corals. We don't grow fish. You know, we have a reef tank in the office, but it's in the office. It's far from our growing areas. And I'm the only one that touches it. Everybody else keeps their hands out of that thing. And because the last thing we want to do is contaminate what we're selling to our customers. That is like that's what keeps us up at night. Not to mention contaminating our own stuff with our own critters, you know, like our rotifers are cultured in a different part of the farm than our copepods. And we have personnel that specialize in just growing phytoplankton. They don't go into the live feeds areas. And you know, we don't cross contaminate, and we use very strict biosecurity protocols, proper protective equipment. We don't allow people to bring their dogs here. If you've, you know, been to the beach or been fishing, you don't come to the farm. Even if you've been to a public aquarium, you just don't come to our farm. And so it's, you know, all of these things just, you know, make us more valuable.
So basically, all us hobbyists have got no chance. Is what I'm taking away from that.
You know, I think that phytoplankton. I think everybody should grow phytoplankton. Just, you know, just once, to kind of get a feel for what it's all about, and, you know, get yourself a microscope and look at it under the scope, and you know, and give it a whirl, because it's not an easy thing to do, but it's rewarding.
And for you, the
Do you know-
the quality control is of utmost importance, because like you said, it's not just, you know, your buddy down the street that you're being responsible for with that food. It's whole businesses, livelihoods, families. You know, you really do take it, you know, those extra levels, and you realize that if you cut corners or you screw up, you're potentially burning not only yourself, but a lot of people down that line too.
Yeah, exactly. A classic example of this is in the Penaeid shrimp farming world. There's this disease called white spot disease, and shrimp farmers all over the world were trading broodstock, trading post larvae, moving these animals all over the world, and eventually the entire shrimp industry collapsed because of this white spot disease. And this is well documented. You can look it up and investigate. But because there was this lax in biosecurity, there wasn't really an understanding of it at the time. All of these shrimp farmers were just sharing this disease with each other. And this disease was wiping out entire shrimp farms in a matter of days. And we're talking everybody was losing. The owner of the farm down to the lowest employee that was just mowing the lawn to keep the ponds clear. And it just was terrible. So now there's these very strict biosecurity rules. Australia has a biosecurity aspect of their government and of anything that's coming into that country. We have to jump through flaming hoops to get our stuff into Australia because they don't want contaminants. I mean, the globe is basically contaminated thanks to shipping. We've essentially contaminated everything with ballast water. So there's a lot of things that we just can't take back. I mean, if you ever go to Florida in the United States, you're going to see some wild stuff in the Everglades and down in the waterways in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. Animals from all over the world live in Florida now, not just because of the aquarium hobby and reptiles and all that, but just, people bringing critters with them and not even realizing, oh my gosh, that animal could survive in this environment that I'm bringing it to. And so it's just, it's a different world now. And so, we have to do a lot of testing with our products to get our stuff into other countries.
Yeah, I totally get that. We've obviously, I assume you're as much as a hobbyist at heart as we all are as well. We're all on the forums, and a little while back, I don't know if anyone else come across it, but there was a particular powdered food that a lot of people were claiming was introducing cyanobacteria to their tanks. I don't know, rightly or wrongly, but that rumor soon started going around, and as soon as someone says it, it's like, I've got cyano, I use that food. It sort of started going. So you've got to be, I suppose, really shit hot on your quality control that stuff doesn't slip, because for argument's sake, that's reputational damage, isn't it? I totally get your sort of level of security on that now.
Yep, absolutely.
But yeah, talking, and just my last bit on phyto is the amount of difficulty that I had growing that and putting hours and hours and effort into it, and it was such a ball ache. And that's your cheapest product, which tells me you find it bloody easy.
Yep. It's been a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of punches to the gut and, failure after failure after failure. But every one of those was a step closer to success. And it's one of the reasons why we're one of the very few people in the world doing it on this scale, is because it's one thing to grow a bunch of phytoplankton in your closet or in your living room in flask. It's a whole different ballgame when you scale up to millions of gallons and millions of liters of this stuff, working with multiple species. It is just something to behold.
And I was thinking the silliness about, the quality control. I'm thinking about we got a species of lizard here that has kind of worked its way up from Miami slowly north over the years. It's finally made its way here. And they look like miniature iguanas with like really, the males have orange heads, but they eat all the native lizard species. They'll eat small birds if they can, and they reproduce very quickly. But I'm thinking about that is how, if you apply it to, your this industry, how quickly can you totally change the entire ecosystem, or the reefing hobby or this industry in particular, by introducing things that we may not be able to take back because they don't have natural predators here. So they've just been slowly, north and north and north.
Yep. Well, Taro, you're in Florida. Do you have python down in your neighborhood?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
My goodness, that's
Burmese
scary.
pythons.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Oh, we got all sorts of crazy shit here. We got a ton of
Oh.
iguanas here now that are taking over, pythons.
Oh.
I mean, and again, they don't have no natural predators. And again, you can put this to any ecosystem, and relate it back is you don't know what you're introducing or potentially changing for that ecosystem. So
Mm-hmm.
See, in the UK, it's boring as hell, right? Our most invasive marine organism is a barnacle species from New Zealand. They come over in the ballast water in the 50s. It's called Semibalanus balanoides. Not many people need to know that. It's a barnacle, for Christ's sake. Why is it a problem? Our native dog whelks prey on barnacles, our own species of barnacles, but the New Zealand ones are like a third the size. And the feeding apparatus of the dog whelk can't predate on these smaller barnacles. So they have just gone everywhere, and it's a problem for like the shipping industry because they coat the hulls of the ships, and they create drag and then fuel price. They're an absolute invasive pest. No one cares about it really at our level because no one. It's a barnacle, is a barnacle, is a barnacle, right? But we don't get nice green bloody parrots and lizards walking around. We get barnacles.
Are they tasty?
There we go. They're too small to eat, Dong. They're too small to eat. But, I'll mix it up a bit. We've got a question from James about TDO pellet. What's the difference between TDO B2 and TDO A?
With those two foods, while there is a slight difference in the nutritional profile of those, it's also the size. So TDO-A is roughly 75 to 250 micron. So that's roughly the size of like a copepod, rotifer, almost to a newly hatched brine shrimp size. So that's like the first food that you would offer to a larval fish or a post-metamorphic fish as you're starting your weaning process. And also you can feed these small particle TDO foods to corals as well. They love it. The difference between the A's and the B's is basically size. So as your target animal starts to grow and you get it onto this weaning diet, as it gets bigger, you can offer it the next size up and so on. And that's why TDO comes in 7 different sizes. The largest size being like a 2.3 millimeter pellet. Typically in aquaculture, you're not getting your fish to eat a 2.3 millimeter pellet. You're getting them out the door way sooner than that. That's why you see smaller fish in aquaculture coming out. Not only because some of these animals grow very slowly, like mandarin dragonets grow incredibly slow. But you also want to get that animal out the door while it's alive and healthy. In case anything catastrophic happens in your facility and you've put all that effort, all that energy, all that money into getting that animal to that point, and then, your heater malfunctions or something crashes, and man, does that hurt, or human error. When I worked at ORA, we used to freshwater dip fish. We would freshwater dip our clownfish when we move them from system to system because we had different levels of grow out, and we size sorted these animals because clownfish are vicious. My God, they kill each other. If there's runts in there, they will just annihilate them quickly. And so we're constantly size sorting and freshwater dipping. And if you left them in the freshwater bucket and walked away and came back, that's tons of money and tons of effort that went into getting those fish to that point. And then you go and tell your boss and everybody's like, dang it. So yeah, that's the weaning diets and getting them out the door soon is important, but that was a good question. Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's steer this towards coral feeding a little bit because I feel in the hobby as a whole, certainly in the UK, when we're talking about keeping corals healthy, all we're talking about is flow and lighting, and maybe, I don't know, is it a buzzword, amino acid dosing. People often get on a high horse about amino acids, and there's my coral. My corals needs flow, lighting, amino acids. Very rarely, especially in the SPS world, do we talk about feeding corals. Now, and I said to you in the chat before, they've got mouths, they must eat something. So what can you tell us? What are we missing in terms of feeding or not feeding our corals?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting topic because feeding corals is different for everyone, and people apply different foods to the same coral, and and maybe have the same results. It's just tricky. Basically, what we've tried to come out with is what our customers have requested: small particle foods that, something like an SPS can ingest and digest and gain nutrition from it. And that's why we work with small particle foods like phytoplankton. Corals will consume phytoplankton, whether they're photosynthetic or not. They will also consume things like oyster eggs. If you've got animals spawning on the reef all the time, and everything's eating those eggs, including corals and fish. And so with our oyster feast, which is oyster eggs and the ovarian tissue. So basically we get oysters from the Pacific Northwest oyster aquaculture in the United States, so Washington State. We bring them in frozen because the oyster, these people that are growing oysters to serve to sell to restaurants, the oysters that have egg sacs and eggs in them aren't very wanted in that world.
Yeah.
And so they sell us the gravid oysters, and then from there we process it, strip out the eggs, and get them down to the right particle size. And so oyster eggs are just chock full. There's amino acids in these things. This is a natural food source. They've got the proteins, the amino acids, make up the proteins, fatty acids, very stimulating to corals. And so a lot of our customers will use our oyster feast to feed to their corals. And with those nutritive qualities, it'll also result in polyps, kind of waking up and recognizing that there's something in the water that I recognize as food. So the polyp starts to fill, hydrostatically, and you get the feeding tentacles coming out, the polyps coming out, and they're starting to consume that food, whether it's during the day or during the night. I know some people that prefer to feed at night, but I've seen people, feeding corals in the daytime, and those polyps are out and doing quite well and consuming. And so, a lot of our customers that buy our products to feed to corals are doing it in an aquaculture setting. And so they're really trying to not just, lighting and water and all that stuff, but to really get some meaty foods, some different variety of nutrition into their corals to get more growth, faster growth, also to create a coral that's more robust, stronger against, more resistance to stress, whether it's fluctuations in your systems, which we don't want. We want stability. But then there's the stress of shipping these animals and moving them to trade shows and all these other things. And so you want your animal to be strong and healthy, and these foods can help with that for sure. And so yeah, that's kind of, we try to offer a variety of nutrition for people that are working with corals. And, not everybody has SPS. There's LPS corals. There are non-photosynthetic corals, and we have a variety of foods for them as well. So like I mentioned, we grow rotifers here that people use as a live feed organism for, like, the clownfish people. They feed rotifers to their clownfish larvae. So the rotifer is an amazing animal because we can control its nutritional profile. It's, just imagine it's a bag and you fill it full of good things, and then your target organism eats it. So we fill rotifers full of phytoplankton. They digest the phytoplankton. They assimilate a lot of that into their tissue. It also stays in their gut. And then we pull these live rotifers out of our culture. We fix them so they're not alive anymore. Then we sell this product called RotiFeast, and RotiFeast is full of these animals that are fully enriched with phytoplankton. So you can feed this rotifer to your SPS coral, you can feed it to your gorgonians or non-photosynthetics, and it's an amazing way to deliver all that nutrition from phytoplankton to your coral through this animal. And that's why, feeding something like that is really unique. You don't see a lot of rotifer products in the industry. You will see people buy live rotifers from growers and put them in their system. And the rotifers aren't going to survive in the system. They're just not built that way. They're just going to get eaten or filtered out. And so it's, and then there's copepods. We also sell very small copepods, like our pack pods, that are also captured and consumed by SPS corals and other corals, especially non-photosynthetics. And copepods, as far as nutrition goes, these animals, it doesn't get any better as far as a zooplankton organism. Nutritionally, copepods are as good as it gets. They are one of the most abundant animals on the planet. Next to worms and copepods are right there neck and neck with abundance. And so Copepods are out there. If they're not parasitic, if they're not eating other, fish larvae, they're eating phytoplankton. And so what copepods can do is they can trophically upgrade the constituents of phytoplankton, so they can consume something and convert one fatty acid into another, which is remarkable. They can also store carotenoids in their body, which gives them that pigmentation. And so when your corals eat a copepod, they are going to get a wide range of nutrition, carotenoids, fatty acids, and also these copepods contain proteins that act as enzymes. And so these enzymes aid in the digestion of themselves, which makes copepods very valuable in aquaculture. People that are doing yellow tangs are feeding these copepods right here behind me, the Parvocalinus nauplii. And when a yellow tang larvae hatches, it has a very rudimentary gut. And so it eats the copepod, and the copepod begins to digest itself. The enzymes in that animal start to digest itself. And then as that, larval fish grows and develops a better digestive system, you can offer it different things. And so it's just, it's basically throwing everything you can at your corals, the variety of nutrition, and just getting them to grow and be healthy. And that's what a lot of our customers come to us for, for those reasons.
Question for you, Chad. In terms of the copepods, what form do they come in from Reef Nutrition? So do they come in powder form, or do they come in like the dense liquid form?
Yeah, they're in whole organism form. They're and they're in liquid suspension. We do sell a frozen copepod. So we have this copepod called the pack pod, and they're harvested from the northern Pacific, the Bering Sea-ish area, and we sell them frozen and also in liquid suspension. We don't sell anything freeze dried or dried out or anything like that. Yeah.
So is that the freeze dry will destroy the copepod's nutrition value?
There's this thing with doing techniques like that, whether it's applying heat or freeze drying. There's always the worry that you're going to reduce the nutritional profile of that animal when you do those things. When you apply heat, you can denature proteins. These things break down, and then that nutritional profile is different from its wild the animal that was harvested from that aquatic environment. And so that's kind of where that's the line we like to the lane we like to stay in, is keeping the animal as whole as it possibly can, and in a state that is very similar to the state it was in when it was alive and thriving in whatever environment it came from.
Because that I do use. Oh, sorry.
Go on. Carry on.
Okay. So sorry. I do use one product from Two Little Fish. They call the zooplankton. Are those copepods?
I'm not sure. There might be copepods in there. I know there's a whole industry out there of powdered foods, and some of them have copepods, some have rotifers, and some even have phytoplankton that's dried out. And so I can't speak to the nutritional value of those. We've never, done any studies on those. But yeah, that's just something that's different from what we want to offer our customers. The only challenge for us is it's more of a pain in the ass, because then you get into this area of where it's a perishable product. It needs to be kept refrigerated.
Yes.
It needs to be kept stable, because we don't want to add a lot of chemical preservatives. We don't want to heat treat our products, and we just don't want to go down the road of adding salts and things. And we don't want you putting a bunch of that stuff in your tank.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter won't allow me to put anything in the refrigerator. So I have to buy a mini fridge.
Yes, and luckily there's good technology out there. The mini fridge world has come a long way, so get yourself a mini fridge. Yeah, I know a lot of guys that will have the mini fridge, a couple of beers in there, and then our food. And, I was like keep our stuff away from your salad dressings, because you don't want to, just grab the bottle, and dump it on your salad.
My wife was very understanding after getting over the hurdle of having frozen rats in the freezer for the pet snake. Reef Nutrition was a breeze. It was a breeze. got a question for
sorry about that. Just a quick
question
joke.
Go on. I've got to hear the joke. Go on.
Okay. So that many years ago, I used to keep a bottle of the phytoplankton in the family refrigerator. One day I opened the fridge and the phytoplankton only dropped to half. But I know I didn't use it. Then I asked a family member, and then she said, "It tastes horrible."
Oh God!
So ever since then, all these things go to his own mini fridge.
Yep.
Sensible.
Good call.
Yep.
Sensible. So, question in the room for the two coral farmers, Dom and Terrell. Do you feed your corals in your facilities? Do you see any benefit to do so?
Oh, definitely feed the coral. That's very important. So
Good.
I mainly feed the homemade frozen food and the powder food, wherever that is laying around. Phytoplankton that I think that, but I don't use any amino acid because that there's plenty of amino acid in all this food already. So there's no reason to dose a little bit more of that. It doesn't do anything. It's a waste of money.
Agreed.
So so definitely feed the coral. You can see a huge difference when you feed the coral just by measuring the calcium and alkalinity the next day after you feed the coral. You can see because like, if you're in a smaller tank, probably you don't see that obvious. But for this large system, yes, then you can see the DKH, like half DKH difference, the consumption.
To the uptake, yeah,
the uptake.
So it's similar for you, Terrell, then?
Difference.
Yep, same. Frozen foods, do like, mysis, Rod's food, like a mixture. I'll do, powdered foods like reefroids, phytoplankton, purple non-sulfuric bacteria, So I don't have a real, everything all the time. It's usually just I always fall back to, the mysis and, Rod's food, here and there. But yeah, man, I just broadcast feed and keep the nutrition varied.
Yeah, okay. Well, I know the question was for you guys, but I'll chip in as well. I feed these liquid feeds for the last 2.5 years. November 2023, I bought my first oyster feast, and I've been using that since then. And I bought it not for the corals, I bought it for my clams. I've got 5 clams on the go, and I bought oyster feast and phyto, and they've just done really well, and I've never seen a reason to change. And then I see the corals doing well, and I feed my corals loads. I feed my corals more than the fish. Don't get me wrong, the antheas love the oceanic eggs. That's a crack to them, and they love it all. So there's no affiliation here. I'm a big fan of the Reef Nutrition stuff. I must say it's done well for me. And on that note, we are going to give people tonight in the UK, not America. You've got rap coming up. You've been treated enough. In the UK, we're going to give people a chance to win some Reef Nutrition stuff too. So if you're in the UK and you want to enter this, it's going to be a little bit of a lottery. I've got a little spinny wheel. If you can just comment in the comments, let's pick a word. Just write copepod, and once you've written copepod, I'll put your name into the lottery wheel, and we will spin it for you tonight. And someone is going to get, courtesy of our great friends at Exodus, 6-ounce bottle of Phyto Feast, Oyster Feast, Oceanic Eggs, Tigger Feast, and Roti Feast. So pretty much the smorgasbord of a load of good stuff. I did actually have a picture. This is what you're going to get tonight, and if you're in the UK, here we go. So yeah, drop your comments in. I'll input it in, and we'll have a spin at the end of the show. And yeah, we'll try and get a few more lucky winners. The only thing I would say, if you do win this stuff, be prepared to not give it up. You will keep using it, and it will be the best thing you've ever done. So yeah, good. I can see people are commenting. Great stuff. So if we carry on our conversation then, so Dom, you jumped the gun on one of the you jumped the gun on one of the questions I wanted to go down, and that was amino acids, the buzzword amino acids. I'm fully in agreement with you, Don. I think corals take up amino acids much better from eating something. I'm not too convinced. I've not seen much proof certainly in written papers about much absorption from the water column versus consuming something. But I don't know. I'm an amateur geek, amateur self-confessed geek. But Chad, is there any truth in that? Is our liquid amino products a waste of time?
You know, it would be cool is if some people went and took water samples from reefs all over the world and looked at that kind of thing. That'd be really cool to know what's kind of out there in the water with those corals. But I'm of the mind that, yeah, you know, if you're giving them a wide variety of nutrition and they're consuming it through their mouth, and you know, and these are like animal products or phytoplankton, they're going to get amino acids, they're going to get proteins that they can digest and break down and assimilate into their bodies from those foods. And so I'm always of the mind that, yeah, they can get those things from foods like ours versus just pouring in aminos. And there's so many amino acids out there. I mean, which ones would be beneficial, which ones wouldn't? You know, there's peptides, there's all these other things. And I figure it's in the natural stuff. It's in the, you know, the products, the frozen foods, the liquid suspension foods. It's already in those animals. And so let your animal just digest it and do what they need to do biochemically.
I think the amino acid thing was originally developed for like the zero vid method, the ultra low nutrient method. So because when you're running those kind of methods, like a zero vid, zero light, that kind of thing, you're definitely not going to feed your coral. So your coral is on a life support, and then that's where the amino acid comes in, to keep them on pale in a hospital, that kind of thing. So yeah, but actually coral does take in amino acid, but they take mostly from their symbiosis algae released inside the coral. That's how they take it. And they can take a little bit from the surrounding water. The literature is saying that it's a very tiny amount. But when you're running on an ultra low nutrient system, you're not feeding anybody. In that case, that a little bit of amino acid does help. But if you're feeding coral in a healthy way, yeah, your coral perfectly fine, because mostly you take amino acid from the symbiosis algae anyway. So yeah, I think feeding the coral make everybody fat and healthy is much better way to do to grow coral than keep them on life support.
That's always been my understanding too. You know, if you're running ultra low nutrient systems and you're not getting it in there with your frozen foods, and you got to supplement somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably, if you're dosing aminos into the water column, there's just going to be a lot more wastage than if you're target feeding an organism.
If you dose amino straight to the water column, mostly consumed by the bacteria.
Which then goes on to feed the SPS coral.
Yeah, it's not your coral who majorly eating them. It's a bacteria who consume them. But if you feed them food like phytoplankton, like oyster egg, it is the coral who get the lion's share of the stuff because they ingest the particle. And bacteria, they cannot do anything to those particles until those things decay, break down to small molecule, and then the bacteria can take it up. But when you have a whole cell flying around, then the coral get it. Or the fish get the oyster egg. The clam get the food. So that's a much better way to the coral.
Okay. Fair.
So my question for the oyster egg. Sorry about it, Jamie. I have one question because we are talking about oyster eggs. So just a side question. After you extract the egg, what do you do to the oyster?
We toss it. It's not much that we're discarding, because we do take a lot of the ovarian tissue and we kind of grind it down into finer particles. And so usually what you're getting is a range from 1 micron to 200 micron in that product, and most of the range is microscopic in that product. So yeah, but we're not like frying them up over here and eating them. With what we've got left, we're making oyster smoothies.
Free lunch.
There's a pearl shop at Reef Nutrition.
I mean, we could get into the chum industry. You know, we could take that stuff and all of our waste and put it into frozen blocks and sell it to fishermen. Because I used to fish in the Florida Keys, and we would always go buy a chum block from a bait store and put that thing in the water and just start going at it.
That would be interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Huh. I see you can repackage them as the frozen food, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
There you go. Do something with our waste stream.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I really like about what you've done as a company is obviously when you go into a reef store, LFS these days, there's a million bottles of potions, there's a million foods, there's a million things you could buy and choose and mix up and all that sort of stuff, and you can get a bit lost. Like, because every product tells you you need it. This is what you need for your tank, and there's no snake oil in this industry. But what I like what you guys have done is you've put together, I don't know if people can see this, a whole chart of all your foods and what they're useful for. So I could pick this up as I walk in the shop front and say I've got a mixed reef with anemones, and I'll see straight away that Phyto Feast might not be the best, but Oyster Feast, Roties, Pods, and the rest of it are going to be good for me. You can pretty much have an idiot's guide to guide you to. You haven't got to be a biologist for this, is what I'm getting at. You've done it quite well. So was that the whole idea of that card?
Yeah, I mean, you're not kidding when you say there's a lot of food out there. Oh my gosh. It's like every day I turn around and there's a new food and it's the greatest thing.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard to keep up with, even with getting TDO into the dry food world, because there's so many flake foods and dry foods that have been around for a long time. And it was a really tough market to crack into. But yeah, we just, we want to make it as simple as possible and educate as best we can and do things like this and get out to trade shows. And I do a lot of presentations and just, have these materials that really educate our customers to just, keep it simple and also educate our stores. I will do store educations where I'll sit down with everybody on a Zoom chat or whatever, something like this, and educate them on what eats what and what to recommend to your customers. Because, ultimately we want our products to be bought at a store, at a local fish store, because we support the stores wholeheartedly. And we want that store to know what they're talking about, and in fact, we prefer the store use our foods so that they can say to the customer, I use this, I like it, I recommend it. Because, you go into some stores and it's just an entire aisle of food and the employees there know nothing about maybe 80% of the foods that are on those shelves. And then you got the stores that only sell what they use, which I'm a big fan of that. We hand out these feed chart postcards to all of our stores, all the hobbyists, and hand them out to the people at trade shows, and they're very thankful for that. And those feed chart postcards have come about via customer feedback over the years.
So all of you guys that went to Mansfield last week and you got your goodie bag, those charts are obviously in there, so you can have a good read through. And just I'd advise to give it a go. So, and John's asked a good question here. So for the guys the lucky person that wins this prize tonight of that five food selection, what do you suggest feeding with all the different products? I guess a bit of it is like Luke says, read the card, John. But if someone does get that prize tonight, is there going to be any harm in putting Phyto into a tank with anemones? Is it going to cause harm, or what do you advise?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not going to cause harm, because there's other things in a tank that will eat phytoplankton, like zooplankton. All the little pods and things that we have in our tanks that we get from other sources, or we buy them and dump them in. They benefit from phytoplankton, things like that. But just look at the label, read the label, follow our recommended dosage instructions. Start off with our lowest recommended dosage. And what I like to tell people is we have a lot of customers that will feed the Phyto Feast and the Oyster Feast together. And so we recommend no more than 5 milliliters per 100 gallons per day if you're a beginner. And we recommend that really low dosage because we have no idea how many corals you have in your tank. You could have 2 corals, you could have 1,000 corals. It's all over the map. Everybody's tank is the snowflakes, right? They're all snowflakes. They're all vastly different than each other, than the next one. We just recommend, like, if you're doing those two combined, you want to combine the volume. So, if you're going to do 5 milliliters, do 2.5 of one, 2.5 of the other. And get yourself a measuring device and use it only for your tank. Keep it out of the kitchen. so that, you know, you're not using it to bake with or anything. You know, you don't want to make anybody grossed out by it or whatever, or these little pipettes, you know, there's pipettes in the industry that you can measure milliliters with. You know, these little graduated pipettes are very useful. And so, yeah, just don't go above those things initially starting off. And then when it comes to the larger foods like the beta brine and the roe, you know, you just want to add a couple of drops of those to the tank, watch your fish consume them, and maybe add a little bit more. Don't just, you know, get the food for the first time and walk up and just squeeze the bottle. That's a surefire way to pollute your tank immediately. And then you're scrambling to do water changes and you know, you're freaking out. You're calling us. You know, we've had people dump an entire bottle of our arctopods, which are not alive. They're not live. They thought that they were alive. They did not pay attention to the instructions. They didn't look at the bottle and go, okay, these are not alive. And they just dumped the entire bottle into their tank. And then they're calling us up, freaking out, blaming us for that. And so, you know, if you're feeding things to your tank, get to know the foods as best you can. You know, I mean, you're putting your money into this stuff. And, you know, we want to keep our animals alive. We want to keep them happy and healthy. And so when you're buying foods, do your research, you know, read the labels. Reach out to the manufacturer, ask the local fish store, maybe go to the forums. Forums can be tricky. You know, we have people that go to forums and ask about our products to the people in the forum. And I'll chime in and be like, we have a tech support line. Please reach out to us. We know the most about our foods because we make them. You know, let's not leave everything to conjecture and anecdotal evidence. Or, you know, whatever stories, just, you know, reach out to the people that do that. And we're happy to help. So.
And you said something before, and it brings me back to it, is you said that you like keeping everything, you know, separated and as whole as possible because everything is fed with intention. So, and like everybody, you know, that's listening on here now, know your foods. Don't just hear, you know, hey, this food is good or this food is bad, and then just go and start dumping stuff in your tank. Understand what you're putting in your tank, and then, you know, look at that next level down.
Yeah, there's some in the UK. We've got like a live food supplier called Aquadistry, and they sell a little live copepod bag. It's cheap. It's like, you know, £1.50, and you get 5 for £6 or whatever it may be. They're little bags of live pods. And a lot of people, this is just a bit of anecdotal advice for people. A lot of people buy those live pods. Hello, pussy. And, a lot of people buy those bags of live pods and think, I'm going to put them in my tank to seed my tank or whatever. They're not going to survive. They're brackish water pods. They're fed primarily just for food. Next time you get one, just do a salinity check on the water in the bag, and you'll see they've kept it about a specific gravity of about 0.0015. They're a brackish pod, so they're not going to seed your tank. So if you want to seed your tank with pods, you've got to find something else. Sorry, that's just me going off on a tangent, just a bit of a snippet of info there. But
yeah, I really wish we could get our live copepods into the UK, but it's just not going to be a thing. And that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. It's okay. There's, you know, I'm sure there's people that have gotten Tigriopus and Apocyclops into the UK somehow, some way, and they're growing them and selling them. And you know, just yeah, you know, educate yourself on the different species that are out there. And there's a lot of information online. Sometimes you got to sift through all the BS to get to the good stuff, but you know, you can do it.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you want live pods in the UK, just go and buy a piece of live rock or swap some rubble with someone and seed your tank that way.
There you go.
That's probably the way to do it. But again, food wise. So a few of the guys on the Reefers network, we've got a few followers from Ireland now, the Emerald Isle, and they say they can't get it. How do they get Reef Nutrition in Ireland? Is that a thing? Is that going to happen at some point?
Northern Ireland, is that part of the UK?
Yeah, that is, but these particular people are in the Republic, so the EU side of it.
Yeah, the EU, man, the EU is super tricky for us.
Yeah.
We have to jump through a lot of hoops to get into the EU. There are some very strict requirements. We have to be inspected by a medical veterinarian from the US Department of Agriculture. We have to be inspected by the Food and Drug Administration, because a lot of these governmental regulations have been applied to human food as well as fish food. They just said, Put them all in the same basket and done. People aren't eating arthropods. They're not putting it on their salad. It's fish food. And then animals, they need to be able to, you have to provide information about the people that are collecting those animals for you, how they're shipping them, how they're preserving them. It is just absurd. I'm always so jealous when I see our competitors with their liquid suspension foods coming out of Germany and Poland, coming into the US, no problem.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh! It's so frustrating, but we're working very hard to get up to where we need to be to have these inspections happen. And a lot of time in the US, these inspectors have absolutely no clue what they're doing when it comes to us. These are people that are dealing with livestock, pigs and cattle and chickens, and birds. But when it comes to phytoplankton and copepods, they're like, what? How do we even deal with this? How do we know you're treating that copepod in a humane way? How do we know the phytoplankton
humane way?
Yeah. How do we know you're
God.
applying biosecurity techniques, the way you should be? It's crazy. So yeah, the EU has been tricky. I mean, I know a lot of you in the UK weren't happy with Brexit, but we certainly were, because then we were able to get our products into the UK. It suddenly was a lot easier.
Yeah, we'll keep politics off this channel if that's all right, Chad, because that's going to divide this bloody in half.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I was just saying that when that happened, it made it easier for us.
Yeah, 100%.
Everything else aside.
As you've explained your products tonight, they're probably the cleanest, most sterile thing we could import. But yet we can import dog food made of mechanically reclaimed meat scraped off a factory floor, but we can't import a biologically clean substance that you've produced. Make it make sense.
Yep. I don't know. Maybe we're not lining people's pockets with enough money. Who knows?
So, Chad, with all these supplies of food under your company, so are you guys going to do live aquaculture for fish?
We have considered doing our own marine ornamental aquaculture.
Yeah.
We're certainly looking into doing our own oyster culture and providing what are called spat. So these are oysters that are starting to settle onto substrates, and then from there we would sell them to an oyster hatchery.
Farm.
They would grow them out and then put them out into like a waterway, a bay, a sound, so that they can feed naturally in that environment before they go to market. So yeah, these are things we're toying around with. We're looking at it through the lens of biosecurity. So it's something that if we go down that road, we want to do it at a facility that's completely detached from where we're at. But we are looking into those things, and maybe doing critters that aren't mass produced, that are, like ornamental shrimp, lysmata, peppermint shrimp, fire shrimp, things like that, which we could sell a whole heck of a lot of and potentially grow a lot of. But it's just another, we don't also want to expand with the number of people that work here. We don't want to get too big, and because then it starts getting really complicated. But yeah, those are some things we're looking into. We're actually growing live mysids right now. And so we're looking to get saltwater. We're looking to get those into the hobby. We've got a lot of public aquariums that are very interested in that, for cygnathids. You've got some public aquariums that have weedy sea dragons, leafy sea dragons, seahorses, pipefish. And also these animals would be great as just an addition to the ecosystem of their systems. Mysids do well in our aquariums. If you put them in a sump and a refugium, they'll do quite well in there. And they'll eat bacteria, they'll eat all kinds of organic stuff. They're very, very ravenous when it comes to eating things. And so that's something that we're looking to start getting into the industry. We're looking at public aquariums first, because we haven't really found a way to get them into the aquarium trade, because what we don't want is we sell direct to consumers. We sell direct to hobbyists, but it's not something we want to do. The only reason why we do it is because we're not in every store in the United States. There are places in the U.S. where our products are nowhere to be found. There are stores that can't handle the nature of our products, which is fine. We're not meant to be in every store. We're okay with that. You know, we're not a flake food that sits on a shelf. TDO aside. And so it's something that we really don't want people to come to us and buy direct when it comes to like a live mysid. And so we're looking at other ways to sell it, and then maybe experiment, you know, moving them through the chain of custody, through a distributor, through a retailer, to a hobbyist, or just to the retailer, to the hobbyist, and see how they do. Because, you know, they're alive, they can die. You know, if they sit too long in a store, they're just going to die. And then we get a reputation of selling things that are dead. And, you know, which is, we've had to drop some products in the past because of that, because our stores weren't selling them quickly enough. And that's the other problem with stores. You know, stores, you know, sales do this all the time with some, you know, they can't predict, you know, how many bottles of our stuff they're going to sell in any given week. So that's something that, you know, we're looking to get them mostly into aquaculture and public aquariums, because we sell a lot of our products to public aquariums, and they grow these animals in the aquariums, and they take up a lot of space. They are very demanding. They are highly cannibalistic. And so you're constantly separating out the adults from the babies, and size sorting them and feeding them a ton of different foods. And so I've been to the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is very close to us. And I can't tell you how many people are like, my gosh, we would love to just give up half of this and just buy them from somebody that's working with them. So it's something that we can do because we grow all this phytoplankton. And so we can, and we grow all these live feed organisms. So it just makes sense that we could do this as well. So in fact, Tim Reed, his son, Colin, just started working for us. And I remember him when he was like a little kid, and now he's working with me, and we're working with live feed organisms. And so he's spearheading that.
So you mentioned the sea dragon, right? The leafy sea dragon, the one that we only see in the aquarium and everybody wants one. So that is it a
don't buy one?
So is it a possibility to become captive bred and enter the aquarium trade?
I think they're already doing it. I think they're already captively doing captive breeding of I think either one of or both, the weedy and the leafy. I'm pretty sure it's been done.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They'll still be protected though. They won't be available for hobbyists for probably forever. But you know.
Right.
Yeah.
If aquariums
knows one day.
get captive breeding programs and just share the F1s, F2s, and all that with each other, and keep good pedigrees, you know, keep track of the genetics and things like that, and and maybe bring in broodstock here and there to invigorate the genetics. But yeah, that's something that's it's quite fascinating. Those animals are amazing. So
yeah,
but definitely not for hobbyists. Yeah. Don't buy one, even if they're on sale. Get out of here with that. It's like buying an ornate batfish. Do you have any idea how big those get and how ugly they are?
Oh my goodness. Oh,
I can't believe those are in the industry. Get out of here. Yeah.
They're so cute in the local fish store. So cute.
Those need to be out of here. Yeah.
So here's a question for you, Chad. With all the phyto that you're producing, how much of your own produce goes back into your supply chain of growing the next organism?
Yeah, so for the rotifers, for the copepods, it's a tiny percentage. It's less than 1% of the amount of algae we're growing goes into growing our zooplankton. And so it's so convenient. I mean, to have algae basically on tap. I can just walk into our walk-in freezer, grab a bag of my favorite phytoplankton blend and thaw it out and feed it to my copepods. It's just, I don't have to grow the stuff. I don't have to touch the phyto at all. It's amazing. And so, but the majority of it is absolutely being sold to fish farmers, shrimp farmers, and bivalve farmers all over the world. And that's another thing, we're really good at shipping it internationally and jumping through all the hoops and getting that done. We're actually looking to get into Ecuador. Shrimp farming is becoming very, very big in Ecuador, and they're really looking to us as a source of nutrition for larval shrimp and broodstock. Enriching Artemia, feeding Artemia to the broodstock, or copepods to shrimp broodstock. They produce a lot more eggs and a lot more sperm when they're fed Artemia that's enriched. So that's just another whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah, that's actually that when you said that earlier, that's a very good cross section between a lot of people that keep aquatics probably keep reptiles as well. And in the reptile hobby, a lot of people are familiar with the term gut loading. So for their crickets, they will feed them, greens and carrot and stuff for that exact purpose. It's the same thing you're doing, right? You're just giving them a good diet before you feed them to your target animal.
Yeah, exactly. That's another really tricky thing about doing finfish larva rearing, is that if you're using rotifers and you're a clownfish breeder, you're growing the rotifers with a product like ours that's phytoplankton, so you don't have to grow the phyto, and you also don't have to do the enrichment phase. It's all built into the product. And so when I talk about enrichment, I'm talking about the fatty acids, because the fatty acid profile has to be very good for that larval fish to do well. And so they're getting all of that from our foods and enriching those animals. And not only is the rotifer gut loaded, it's also assimilating some of that stuff into its tissue, into its body. But when it comes to feeding a live rotifer to a larval fish, you want to pull that rotifer out of the culture as it's fed, as it's enriched, feed it to your larval fish, and you want your larval fish to consume that pretty rapidly within hours. There's also another technique in aquaculture called green water technique, where you add algae to the larval rearing tank, and this serves a few purposes. And so what it does is it provides contrast for larval fish to be out in the water column swimming around while they're hunting down that prey organism. It also makes them more comfortable. I've seen clownfish in a clear larva rearing tank literally just pinning themselves to the glass, just doing this, getting damaged, not eating, starving, all that. When you add the green water, they come off the glass and they start swimming around. The green water also keeps the rotifer fed and enriched while that larval fish is hunting it down and eating it. So it's quite a balance between, keeping your larval, your live feed organism nutritious while your fish is consuming it. And so you don't want rotifers left over the next day in your larva rearing tank, because those rotifers are basically empty. And the same goes with Artemia. So when Artemia hatches, because these guys go through different stages of development, when Artemia hatches, it's got a very good lipid profile. It's not begun its exogenous feeding. It's not consuming food from its environment. It's digesting food from within. It's a yolk sac, basically, like a larval fish, and so on. And so once that Artemia goes through its first molt, it loses that lipid profile rapidly. And so then you have to start feeding it things to keep that lipid profile, to keep those vitamins and things going in that organism. And so, yeah, it's super tricky. And then you get into the yellow tang and these broadcast spawners that have these teeny tiny larvae. You wouldn't believe how small these things are. It is wild. We're talking the size of an eyelash. And with the copepods that are behind me, the Parvicalinus, what companies like Biota have had to do is you raise these copepods, and as soon as this species of copepod, Parvicalinus, they broadcast their eggs, and so they mate with a male, they store the sperm, and they fertilize their own eggs as they release them. And so they fertilize the eggs, they release it out their urogenital pore, and then that egg starts to develop into an embryo, and it hatches. As soon as it hatches, it's starting off its life stages. It goes through many stages as well. And so that first stage is the ideal size for that yellow tang to consume. As soon as that nauplii goes through its next stage of development, it can't fit in the mouth of the yellow tang larvae. And so these guys are like, these people that are doing these fish, you have no idea how challenging this stuff is and how far they've come to produce this many fish, because they have to feed that newly hatched nauplii to their larvae and get them as many of those into that larvae as possible. And then as that larvae grows, then they can start eating larger prey items.
Yeah, that sounds like perfect coral food for SPS.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love hearing this because I got a good buddy of mine that actually used to work for ORA, and then he ended up running his own clownfish, breeding business. But I remember visiting his facility, and everything is exactly as you described. It's all done in stages. The clownfish can only eat this specific thing for the first few days. Then you got to keep moving them up the chain. But hearing you talk about this and seeing the actual production side of it is quite impressive.
Yeah, it's really cool, me coming from this world and having that intimate knowledge and having an understanding of what these biologists, these technicians with these companies are going through, and how absolutely remarkable it is that they're doing this in a purely 100% captive bred situation. This isn't where they're like pulling in seawater and all the critters from seawater are feeding to their larvae. They have to grow the algae, they have to grow the copepods, they have to feed our phytoplankton to their rotifers and culture all of these things to support that larvae, to get that animal to grow and get it out the door and sell it. It's just amazing.
It's a lot of research, time, and effort have gone in to get to this stage, isn't it? And that's testament to those guys that have done it. Like, I mean, the hobby of breeding fish sort of definitely started in the freshwater world, and freshwater fish are inherently easier to spawn and raise than pelagic spawning marine fish. So, yeah, most fish I've ever bred in the past have all been freshwater, and when they hatch, they're already taking prepared foods and they're grazing. They're easy to rear. I don't think we have a comprehension in this hobby of what pelagic larvae means. It's not a baby fish at that point. It's something completely alien to a fish. And yet microscopic or, really, really minute. And yeah, it's incredible that they've done that. They've actually
there's a reason why clownfish were dominant as an aquaculture species for so long, because clownfish lay their eggs. Their larvae are large enough to eat a rotifer. Their larvae go through metamorphosis pretty quick. Within about 7 or 8 days, they can be weaned on to prepared foods. Even before they go through metamorphosis, they can be weaned on to a powdered pelleted diet. So that's why clownfish have dominated this sphere for so long. All while all of these people, like you said, behind the scenes have been working out the kinks on these other more difficult species. And so here we are. And there's captive bred butterflies and tangs and angelfish. It's just freaking amazing. I love it.
That's
how
incredible.
about dottybacks? When you compare to clownfish, dottybacks.
Dottybacks are very similar. They spawn. They have these little egg masses that the male protects. We would put them in little PVC tubes with a cap on the end, and they would get in the tube, and they play around with their eggs. And once we saw the embryos were starting to develop really shiny eyes, we knew they were going to hatch. So we would pull that little tube out, pour it into a little tumbler. We would tumble the egg mass in the larva rearing tank, and then they would hatch through these little cracks in these little openings, these pores in the tumbler, and then they would start eating rotifers. Because that's the other thing is a lot of these species have been captive bred for so long because they can be fed rotifers. These people didn't have to culture copepods to do this, because copepods is a much more complicated animal to work with. So rotifers are asexual when they're happy and healthy. They're all females. They're just cloning themselves. They can double their density every 24 hours. Whereas copepods are sexually dimorphic. There's females, there's males, they're courting, they're going through all these stages of development. Their growth rates are way slower. And also, people weren't working with the right copepods back then. And so now there's like the parvicalinists are much more prevalent in aquaculture, but a lot of these things, cardinal fish. So I worked with pajama cardinals. I was able to grow those on rotifers, dottybacks, like the dottybacks, like the Fridmanis, the orchid dottybacks. Those were, I loved growing those. They were amazing when they go through metamorphosis and the whole tank just went purple. And so that's one of the reasons why only those animals were being captively bred, was because of that live feed organism. That was the bottleneck for the longest time.
Okay. Let's touch on what John said here. So we all look at lighting, flow, etc., but maybe Chad has the best ideas of how to keep corals and fish. So let's see, where are we with the feeding, right? So obviously you need your lighting, you need your flow, you need your supplementary feeding. Where are we in terms of importance? How would you rate the 3?
That's good. Rating it. Yeah, because you want to say they're all they're all equal pieces of the puzzle. They're all equally important. Yeah, because there's even people that don't necessarily feed their corals directly. They feed their fish, which they're feeding maybe a frozen blend to their fish, and all the little tiny particles and juices are indirectly feeding the corals as well. And so feeding. I mean, for me, feeding is paramount. On top of the lighting and water and stability and things like that. And so I would add equal weight to all three things. If you really want, we use the word thrive. That's really that word carries a lot of weight, because what does it mean to be a thriving animal in a box with water in it? But I just feel like nutrition is just also vital to these organisms, to their life, to their stability, to their success. Not just our fish. There's nothing better than feeding fish. I do it every morning. I kick back, feed the fish. I can tell if they're not doing well, if they're not happy, by how they're eating. It's like when you raise kids, it's the same thing. You're living and dying by things eating, and if they're not eating, something's wrong, and so on. With corals, it's way trickier. But I prefer to feed my corals. I feed them everything I can as often as I can. And so I add equal weight to that. Lighting is interesting too. There's a lot of argument, blue, too much blue, all this other stuff, but the variety of nutrition that's out there from product lines like ours I just think is incredibly important.
I think you hit the nail on the absolute head there when you said about people feeding their fish. I think people are feeding their corals more than they realize they're feeding their corals. When you're you're defrosting your frozen food for your fish and tipping it into your tank, the fish eat the big particles and the shrimp, but all of the rest of it, all that dissolved matter, all that particulate, that is coral food we are feeding. And I think what we're doing with the Reef Nutrition stuff is literally target feeding specific bits for the corals, not just broadcast feeding bycatch, if you like. We're actually targeting stuff. So I think if we as a community realize that actually the corals are consuming a lot more than we think they are, we might think about feeding them differently. Does that make sense?
Yep, being more deliberate, more direct, and even target. I know people that like to target feed. Some corals do the mucus method. Like scalemia and stuff. They'll capture the food with mucus and kind of reel it in, and that's something you can see in real time. That's a really fun thing to watch. Or acans and stuff like that. You see them kind of come alive, and people do time lapse of this. And then that's another way to really get a very strong dose of food. I mean, target feeding is really tedious, but there are people that really like to do it, and that's a good way to get a very concentrated dose of food to your corals.
I think feeding it definitely is critical. I think that feeding definitely is critical. Because that they have a mouse, they gotta eat something, and right now that I have a different kind of problem is that I got a carpet anemone, the one I want. That thing will feed on anything. So every morning I come down, I count the fish in that tank. I say, nobody's missing.
Yep, those are fish killers. Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
And then the other thing is that the sorry about that, Jamie. Go ahead.
No, it's going on. We've interrupted each other so much tonight, Don. Please keep going.
Yeah. So
okay, I'll take it. I was going to say the tip I've got for feeding liquid foods like Reef Nutrition is I've got an LPS system over here, and it's got Lobophilia, chalice coral, hammers, torches, all the rest of it. Now, obviously, when you put the food in, they olfactory sense whatever they do, and they start to open up, but quite slowly. So what I tend to do is have my pot of mix or whatever, and I'll put a couple of drops in it, wait 10 minutes for it to open, and then feed quite a lot. And that way, you sort of you spike their appetite. They're all opened up expecting something, rather than tipping the whole lot in one go or whatever we do, and it all goes down the overflow before they had a chance to collect it. What my tip is, just do a few drops to get that scent in the water, and then go for it. That's just me.
That's good. That's one of the things that we sometimes recommend is feeding a little bit of the oyster feast to your tank and
Yeah.
kind of getting your corals into a feed mode, if you will, waking them up, getting them into that mode where they're actively capturing food and bringing it in, because some corals are slow to wake up to that than others.
Yeah, oyster feast, I think, is a retailer's best friend. 5 minutes before opening, a dose of oyster feast in the coral tables does wonders.
Yep,
Thing pops up and
when I go to trade shows, I have some of my customers who are selling at the trade show will come up to me and be like, "Hey, can I get some oyster feast? I want to. Can I squirt some oyster feast in my system? To make the corals more marketable. And I'm like, hey, yeah. I always bring a little cooler. I put it under the table. It's my secret stash, and I'm happy to help. Those people, wake those corals up and get them sold. Because that's what they're there for.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
So
there is another use for oyster feast for online coral retailers. Before they take the photo and take the video, they drop some oyster feast, polyps start flying, take a photo.
Yeah,
Well,
good.
People also use like the polyp booster from Polyp Lab, or you can use oyster feast and then just entice the polyp come out, because the polyp does sell coral. People love to see that.
yeah, 100%. But also the coral's extending its polyp as a feeding response, so it's a genuine response to a food, isn't it? It's not.
Right.
It's not doing it artificially.
At least they get something to eat when you feed them oyster feast, right? They open the polyp, they're expecting something to eat, and so they do get something.
Yep.
Well, here's the deal, Chad. I don't know how much you're aware of the UK market, but there are one or two, should we call them copycat products of oyster feasts that have now hit the shelves. I don't know if you've seen them. I won't mention brands. I've tried all of them. I bought the two others that I've got in mind, and they're worlds apart. They are watery. They don't contain actual oyster gonads. I don't know what they are, but I know that copying is the greatest form of flattery and all that. But is it your methods and your ingredients and your techniques that really set you apart, or how do you feel about copycat setups?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for so long. We've stayed in this lane for so long. We haven't really, we've diversified with more food types, but we haven't done anything else. And we just really pay close attention to, using the right chemistry in the bottle, because some of the products require different chemistry than others. It's just because of the nature of what it is. And so we apply different techniques for the liquid suspension, depending on the thing we're putting in there. And also we just want to provide something incredibly concentrated, because our product is not cheap. It is one of the more it's one of the more expensive products out there.
Yeah.
And people call it premium for whatever that's worth. But we try to, like with our Phyto Feast, a lot of people don't realize that it is so concentrated that even though you're paying $15 US, I don't know what UK that would be, for a bottle of Phyto Feast, you're getting so much more phytoplankton in that 6-ounce bottle than you would ever get from anybody's gallon jug that they're dispensing out of their culture. We did a study against our competitors years ago, and we found that with people who are selling blends of algae, because that's what we do. We don't sell single species algae products into the hobby. We just make it a blend because we feel like that's more important, because of the variety of nutrition in each species. We found that what we considered our top competitor in the U.S., that our product was 45 cents per gram, whereas theirs was $9.22 per gram. The cost savings is significant when it comes to just the Phyto Feast. And so, when it comes to that, you're saving an incredible amount of money. And also, if you're buying the PhytoFeast concentrate, it's good for at least 9 months. We've done extensive research on shelf stabilization, best buy dates, and that's what we call it, a best buy date. We don't call it an expiration date because we're very conservative. So once it gets to 9 months, and you're like, is it still good? Well, if it smells like it normally does. And don't get me wrong, when our phytoplankton is concentrated in a bottle, it's very pungent. Some people are grossed out by it. Some people think it smells like, their local beach or whatever. And so as long as you're not detecting the smell of rotten eggs, because then that things are going bad. You're getting anaerobic bacteria, you're getting hydrogen sulfide gas being released, and things are breaking down and it's spoiling. And we know when things spoil, we've evolved to know when something is spoiling. Our food. And same with color change. If you see a significant color change, if you see the algae go from green to brown, then that something's going wrong in that bottle. But the fact that it can last 9 months, you can buy a bottle for $15 or $20 and have it last 9 months. That's remarkable. If you're being conservative and you've got the right size system and you're feeding it out. And so the cost savings is tremendous when you're buying our products. But even so, fish eggs, things like that. I know people that sell frozen fish eggs. There's freeze-dried, powdered things out there that people, do well with and they are loyal to. That's totally fine. Yeah, we just tend to be one of the more premium product types out there. And that's just where we want to be.
It's
So
I don't rarely openly say to a guest, I disagree with you. But I'm going to disagree with you, Chad, on the expensive thing. Because I first thought when I bought it, it was expensive. But then I started doing it at the proper dosage, and it goes a very, very, very long way. So it turns out to be really good. So, for example, right, the 6 products we're giving away tonight, they range in price from $13.99 for the Phyto to ticker pods at $49.99. Now that Phyto, 14 quid, will last me 3 months. How is £14 over 3 months? That's not an expensive product. Considering I'll be buying it off of, previously I bought Phyto off eBay, at like 15 quid, like you say, for a litre bottle, which is just a very light green soup. Whereas your stuff has stained my t-shirts with drips of it, like it's so dense. It's nothing. We're in a hobby, right, where cheap generally does mean crap. And we're also in a hobby where we're used to paying premium prices for most products. But food and nutrition is one thing I don't think we should scrimp on. Like, no one buys those $2.99 pots of flake food anymore because we've all come to realize it's just ash and fiber and crap. Yeah. Everyone, if you're spending, 50 quid or more per coral, per frag or whatever it is, and your tank's worth a lot of money, you want to feed it something that's pretty decent. I do anyway, right? And I say I would disagree. On the face of it, you might say it's expensive, but because it's so concentrated, I don't think it is.
Here's something that'll blow your mind. So that Tigger Feast product that's in the raffle or whatever, the Tigger Feast. So those are the Tigger pods that we culture. Those are aquacultured copepods. Those are not harvested from the ocean. It's incredibly unique. Nobody has a product like that on the planet, because of our mass production of the copepods, because we have the algae to support that. And so in that one bottle is roughly 53 bottles of Tigger pods. That's the equivalent biomass in that 1 6-ounce bottle. Wow. So if you were to buy 53 bottles of Tigger pods in the US, that would be $1,563 US.
Yeah.
That's how much biomass, how that stuff is like gold. And we're only charging, like you said, $40, $50. And yeah. So.
What is the particle size in that Tigger pod?
So Tigger pods range from 250 micron to 1.7 millimeter.
Okay. So that's more for LPS and fish?
And fish, yeah, Anthias, chromis, and really any fish
Mhm.
is going to eat those as soon as they hit the water column, because
Yeah.
copepods know a good thing when they see it, and copepods are a good
Yep,
thing.
yep, yep. There's nothing
Um,
left for the rest. They
yeah,
almost
yeah,
go.
yeah, and that's why we always recommend when you put live pods in your tank, turn the lights out, kill the pumps, then add them, because your
Yep,
fish are just going to wipe out what you just bought.
exactly. That's a very good point. Yeah, yeah. The fish are gonna wipe them out.
Yeah.
So I've seen people buying live copepod and teakopod, whatever, try to populate a tank. It's not that successful, and because the fish are gonna just wipe them out. I have another question is regarding your oyster egg. So besides oyster egg, what other eggs actually can potentially be showing up on your pipeline? Can also be a very good coral and or larvae fish larvae food besides oyster.
So you know, do you know about our other egg product, the fish eggs? We call it roe, ROE.
Yeah, the roe, yeah.
Yeah,
But
that would
those are
be the.
fish roe, but not urchin roe.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Other forms of roe from invertebrates. Yeah,
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure why we haven't done that. It may be because of the cost. It may be
Ah,
because, oysters are mass produced in aquaculture, so the cost is going to
oh,
be a lot less than somebody
yeah.
harvesting oysters, from some local water source. Or I know there's some people that spawn. Not oysters. I mean, sea urchins. I know people
Yeah.
that spawn urchins in captivity. They're much more tricky to deal with, and so I think it just boils down to the cost of things and accessibility to large quantities.
Because
And I know there's
in
other forms of
ocean,
roe out there too. There's other fish roe. Mullet roe is very popular.
yeah.
And but we just get ours from the cod and haddock the North Pacific fishery. We get them from those
Mm-hmm.
guys, and because those are a very commonly fished animal.
Yeah, because the reason I ask is that I look at Australia, they have this problem about urchins. So I know that the local reefers, they go to Korean store, Korean supermarket, they buy the uni, the urchin roll,
Yep.
and they feed that urchin roll to the coral and fish. The result is fantastic.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if that was something that we could do affordably and make it affordable for our customers, that uni, yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, that
exactly.
stuff is yeah, just top notch.
Yeah.
But it's just not readily available. It's not something that's aquaculture has a big
Mm-hmm.
fishery, so to speak, attached to it. But oh my gosh, I would love to, have something like that. Yeah.
So you mentioned the Artemia, the at the best stage, right? Can you guys isolate that at that stage and pack it into the product?
Yeah, that's also something we're considering working with is hatching Artemia and
Mm-hmm.
freezing them, right? As soon as
Yeah.
they hatch, just harvesting the whole
Yeah,
thing,
exactly.
freezing it,
Right at that stage.
and then
Yeah.
process it from there and create a newly hatched Artemia product, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's in a frozen form for people in aquaculture, or hobbyists, and maybe like and that would be us getting into more of the frozen foods side of things. But also
Exactly.
we could do a liquid suspension version of that, and that's something that we're considering as well. Yeah.
The reason I ask is that the freshly hatched Artemia actually being used for coral study.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
for the feeding. Yeah. So that is something very interesting because that has some scientific study back it up as a coral food.
Yeah,
So
and
of course
what's cool
yeah.
is there's this technology in the Artemia world where they coat so Artemia form cysts. They're the
Yeah.
little encapsulated
Mhm.
eggs,
Yeah.
and there's a company that has been able to coat the cyst. I believe it's iron oxide, a very thin layer of iron
GFO?
oxide,
Yeah.
and then you
Magnetized eggs.
run it through a magnet.
Yeah.
After you hatch them, you run the whole thing through a magnetic tube, and all of the cysts, all those shells, are removed from the Artemia as they come out the other end,
Oh,
because
Wow.
those shells, those cysts can harbor bad bacteria. There's
yeah.
a genus called Vibrio that can be very harmful
Mhm. Yeah.
when it's at high quantities, high concentration, and it's called Separt. We actually sell these. Inve is a global company that that sells into aquaculture. It's just throwing that out there. It's really cool, like the technology around stuff like that. And that's something that we would, do here. We would just do giant hatching cones, let's say 2,000, 3,000 liter hatching cones, hatch like 4 or 5 cans, which is just millions of these things, run them through these magnetic tubes, come out the other end, and then process them from there. And that's something that we're looking to get into.
Yeah, well, when you have that product, take my money. Take
that is something that would have massive value. So as I sort of do voluntary day at AAC, and AAC have got a seahorse farm, and then obviously we culture all our own nuclei, and we have a hatchery in there and all that sort of stuff, and that's almost pretty much a full-time staff member doing that just for a fairly small scale seahorse farm. And even that has to be supplemented with in-source products and that sort of stuff. It's people don't see that side of it. It's a really intensive. So if you can do that on a major scale and a commercially viable scale, man, there's a market for that.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
massively.
I know there's a lot. There's been Artemia on the market since I was a kid. It was San Francisco Bay Brand was the first frozen food that I used in 1988 when I got a saltwater tank. That's how old I am. And I'm not sure if I know San Francisco, a lot of these companies still exist. They're selling brine shrimp. I'm not sure if they're doing what I was talking about, where they're actually hatching them,
that's stage.
harvesting them immediately as soon as they hatch, and then fixing them, and then creating a product. And it's purely newly hatched Artemia. It's not like different stages of development. So that it would be, I think it would be unique. I'm not sure if somebody has done it that exact way.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
Because the San Francisco based Artemia is more for fish food. They're pretty big. They're pretty later stage.
Right. They're typically larger. Yep.
Cool. Guys, we're coming towards the end of our 2-hour slot. Doesn't feel like we've done 2 hours at all, but just want to. I've got so much more I wanted to talk about, and I do want to talk a little bit about Reefapalooza and you guys that are exhibiting there. Give you a bit of a platform. Before I do that, I just want to bring people should know as well. We've got a UK show coming up in June. Love to Reef. I'll just bring it up on screen. It should work. So 20th of June. It's at Latin Bush Centre, as always. It's usually in May, but it's been put back a month because of the Interzoo show. There's already 13 exhibitors signed up. We've got fish sellers. We've got talks on the day. We've got stands from Reef Nutrition is one of them. Red Sea, Eco Marines, Shezar, Aquaprint, all of these people. Prestige Reef there for the first time. It's 25 quid a ticket. This is the 5th year the show's been run. As most people will know, it is all for charity. All the profit goes to charity. And in the last 4 years, Paul Longhurst and AAC have raised, £13,000 in the last 4 years. So it's definitely a show worth getting behind. And all that the charity is obviously Mind Mental Health Charity in the UK, which has got a massive affiliation, to the reefing hobby. I think a lot of us have a lot of stress relief from our hobby. Oh, well, at times, right? It can be stressful, but it's certainly got a mental health likeness. So it's a great show. It's a great thing to come to. And there are guest speakers to be confirmed. So yeah, that's on the 20th of June. If you want tickets for that, you can get them from AAC online, or you can go lovetoreef.co.uk or message Paul Longhurst, Fish Palace, or on the socials, and get sorted. And no doubt, we always stay over on the Friday night beforehand at the Green Man, so there's a bit of a social side of it as well. So just a bit of a plug. There you go. Chad stayed at the Green Man. He'll vouch for it. Yep. Just a bit of a plug for the UK scene. But obviously, this next week, you guys, Reefapalooza, one of the biggest shows going. I know you both are exhibiting there. So yeah, do you want to, Terrell, start with you? What's happening? What have you got planned, man?
Well, if you guys are going to come to Reefapalooza Orlando, be sure to come by and see us at booth 332. So when you kind of come into the show, we're going to be closer to the back left-hand corner, but we're going to be on an end cap. So yeah, dude, come see some amazing coral. We actually have a 2-part that we're coming out with. We actually have a 4-part system that we're going to be coming out with, but 2-part is dropping at Reefapalooza. But come by and come see Mr. Frank. We have Mr. Mark Coates from Ocean Sea Wave. He's going to be there and getting his foot into the U.S. market. So we are hosting him. So yeah, come by and come see us, and we'll see you guys at Reefapalooza.
Awesome. I'm sure you're going to have so much stock there. I know you've told me that all the prep you've been doing.
Oh, I'm excited, man. The tanks are packed to the brim. My racks are full. We have huge chunky pieces. So, you know, we're bringing what people are expecting to see.
Awesome. I mean, yeah, I'm a little bit jealous that I can't be there seeing your recent social posts and stuff, but I'll watch from afar and I can't wait to see it. Chad, you're going to be there too?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We've been supporting Reefapalooza since it started in somebody's backyard in Southern California, man. This show goes way back. And when Vic and Lou with Worldwide Corals were allowed to take it over and, you know, in other parts of the US, they just turned it into something just absolutely epic and amazing and fun, educational. We have been sponsoring it for quite a while now. We're the platinum sponsor. So as soon as you walk through that front door, you're going to see me and Hillary and some of our entourage. I'll even be bringing my daughter with me to the New York one later in the year. I'm like bring my kids along. But this show is just such a great time. I mean, it doesn't get any better than a hobbyist or a store owner or distributor to just meet face to face with the vendors, with the people that are doing all this work, ask technical questions, you know, press the flesh, shake hands and hugs, and have a beer at the after parties. That's where the real business is done. And just the energy is electric. I cannot believe the industry can support as many coral growers as there are that come to this show. It blows my mind. So, you know, good for all you guys, especially the ones that have been around for a long time. But yeah, please come see us. You know, we hand out free samples of TDO. We also sell some product out of the fridge at discount. We have some local retailers in Florida that sell at the show as well. And so we would love to see you guys there. Yeah, there you go. TDO sample. Yeah. And yeah, and, you know, in supporting these shows, just, it means the world. You know, people come with their kids. There are new hobbyists that have never gotten in, that are considering getting into the hobby. And there is no better place for inspiration than a Reefapalooza or any trade show for that matter, to inspire people to get an aquarium. To, you know, if they're on the fence, it pushes them over the edge. And then next thing you know, they're walking out with big tanks, filters. They're coming to me and they'll be like, you know, in 3 months, I'm going to order some pods and get them into the tank. And I want to use your foods and all this. So yeah, it's nonstop madness. I get so exhausted from talking all day long. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh man, and like you said, man, it's the social of being able to get there and meet everybody, meet the vendors, meet the clients, meet your average hobbyist. And I mean, hey, for anybody that's going to this show, go and take your time. Don't just go for the coral. Go the wealth of knowledge and the people that come to this show. You're not going to get it anywhere else. So take your time and talk to these people and realize that these people they're just like you and I, man. They love this hobby. They love that you're in this hobby, and they will take the time to talk to you and teach you. And they're geeking out just as much as you are. Because I know I do. When people come to my table and they're talking to me, next thing you know, I got like 10 people at the table, but I'm like locked into talking with one person, and the conversation's so good, and I'm like, I can't right now, you know. But that's what it is, man. It's just it's awesome. Go meet everybody. Go see some amazing coral, and yeah, don't miss it.
Yeah, I look well jealous, absolutely well jealous. It always looks great from afar. There's so many people there. The vibe is good, and if I'm honest with you, the UK scene is obviously we're years behind the scale and the size of what the US has got. But you've got a bigger capture base as an audience, I suppose. But we're getting there, and our shows are getting better and better every year. And I should just say, because I did forget to say, we've got some new vendors doing Love to Reef this year, and they are as follows. We've obviously got AAC, who are based on near enough on site, Collective Corals that have been there before, Eco Marines, and Prestige Reef. So it's good. It's going to be good to have all of those guys there. We've got a few talks to be arranged. If I just run a very, very short little video before we go on to the. So what we want to do on the Reefers Network is show you a little bit of what we do in the UK. We want to see some follow-up stuff from Rap about how you got on, all the videos and footage you guys took, how successful it was, and just share those experiences. We need to learn from you guys big time about putting these shows on. But yeah, great. So hopefully it's a very successful show for you. Terrell, you're not going to be here next week, obviously, because you're going to be too busy talking to all your fantastic customers.
Nice.
I'm just going to run now for the UK members that have commented. We have got our giveaway now for the bundle. If I can just remind everyone, it is for 6 ounce oyster feast, phyto, red oceanic eggs, ticker pods, and roti. Guys, seriously, this is like this is a 160 quid bundle we've got going on here, retail price. So, and that is courtesy of our friends at Exodus. I'm going to ask, after people said a while ago about the volume, please turn your volume down now if it affected you last time. Here we go. So we're going to do the live draw right now on screen. All cards on the table. It's just a random generated wheel of names online. So nothing can be falsified. We'll do it live so you can see. Hopefully you can see that now. Everyone's names have been input down the side here that commented the word copepod. So I'm going to give it one spin only. Winner takes all. Here we go. Good luck, everybody. You've got Bristol Reefer Lee. Congratulations, wow. Lee. You lucky boy. Well, if you get in touch with me or Tom, we'll arrange with Steve at Exodus to get that sent out to you, mate. But very well done. That's Lee, the Bristol Reefer, has got the prize of 160 quid worth of Reef Nutrition. And yeah, if you could, once you've used it and abused it and had some fun, feedback your comments, and yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, well done. I think, to be fair, Chad, that 2 hours has gone a lot quicker than some streams we've done. We could talk for hours about putting knowledge out of your brain in pieces. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, thank you so much for giving up your time and coming to speak to us. Dong, any last final words from yourself?
Have fun. He's
inspirational,
dude. Thank you very much for chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Dong.
Thank you,
Learn
Chad.
a lot of stuff.
Jamie, appreciate it.
So,
thank you.
I wish you all the best for. I wish you guys all the best for next week, and
thank you, man.
Report back. Chad, thanks again, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, thank you everyone that's in the comments and listened, and we'll listen back. So until next time, we shall see you again.